Anybody else for $250?
Where are we seeing hands? All right.
All right, bring
well
one
done. Write your checks to Mud Now. The ushers and volunteers should be getting those boxes around and passing them around to everybody.
All right, we're going to start passing the boxes. Fill out your contributor forms if you don't have a checkbook. If you got cash, you know what? We'll take it. Okay? Catch.
All right, folks.
Everything goes in the box.
To the volunteers and the ushers, please put whatever checks you can, write it out to Mud Now, put them in the box, your change, your cash. Let me tell you, this is what the fuel is going to be in order to win this campaign. And once we win this beachhead, I guarantee you we will export it to other cities in California who do not benefit from public power and through the United States, and we will kick their ass.
Everybody, reach into your wallets, take out your cash, fill out the forms, give us a check, whatever you can do, pass the boxes and play the music.
All right, one thing is, hold on a second. One of the unique features of this campaign, and this is rare, is the fact that you not only get to elect the enactment of having public power municipal utility district, but a companion feature of getting to elect great candidates who are running for the MUD board, because you can't get rid of the PG&E Executive Board of Directors, and you can't get rid of the appointed Public Utilities Commission, but you can elect and you can get rid of MUD Board directors. So I'm going to ask MUD Board directors to please stand and just recognize that we have candidates in the room. You guys want to stand and give a round of applause. Well done. It's a pioneering undertaking because how unusual this particular feature of a campaign is. So there's twice the responsibility of educating the voters of this particular style to campaigning. There are other candidates in the room. It's an off-year election. There are city attorney candidates, I imagine. Please stand and give them a welcome if there are. More than, all right. I am going to conclude. You don't have to applaud quite yet, and I want to ask you to please make sure when you leave, this is our signature of fight. This is the fact that we can't afford those ridiculous TV commercials, shameful and crass. We cannot afford, well, maybe we can do something with theirs, those utility pole signs that you see. But we can do something by putting this in your window. As you leave here, please take one. There are volunteer forms being passed around. We need you to volunteer. And this Saturday, there will be two very important mobilizations, and the following Saturdays and Sundays thereafter. There are flyers being passed. We ask you to give at least 4 hours between now and November 6th. That is not much. If everybody here gave 4 hours, we could win this campaign because it will be propelled by a people field campaign. So get a sign, volunteer, and let's win. Thank you very much.
And now let's hear Patti Smith. You can give anything, give it now. If you haven't given yet by now, on the way out, we're going to have these beautiful kids at the doors. They're going to have the boxes. They're going to be shaking you to remind you, don't anybody walk out of here with change. In Oakland, there was $5,000 in change in the boxes. If you can put in $1, $2, $5, whatever you can do. Steve Williams, the Green Party candidate for city attorney, has asked for 30 seconds. And Neil Eisenberg wants 30 seconds to respond. All right, guys, you each got 30 seconds. Steve Williams, Green Party candidate.
Thank you very much. Obviously, the MUD is more important than any single candidacy. However, the city attorney will be on the front line of enforcing it. There's only one environmental candidate in this race. I've garnered every environmental endorsement. I have 5 members of the Board of Supervisors, including Tom Amiano, Matt Gonzalez, Jake McGoldrick, Aaron Peskin, and Leland Yee supporting my candidacy. I ask for your vote.
Thank you. Mr. Eisenberg, 30 seconds. Did Mr. Eisenberg want 30 seconds? Or do he already have 30 seconds and that's enough? Okay, thank you very, very much. Remember the boxes on the way out, and in a very short time, we'll have Ralph Nader.
So it's really terrific to see such an enthusiasm in the midst of tragedy, which is not to be confused with the concept of Schadenfreude, which is getting a pleasure out of other people's misery. Recently I had a Schadenfreude attack when they canceled the Emmys. So I now have the honor of introducing Medea Benjamin. Medea is the founding director of the San Francisco-based human rights organization Global Exchange. And I'm happy to say that I voted for her when she was the Green Party candidate for U.S. Senate from California. For over 20 years, she has supported human rights and social justice struggles around the world. Her most recent work has centered on California's energy crisis, fighting the market manipulation by the big energy companies and rate hikes that cause hardship for low-income ratepayers and small businesses. She heads a powerful coalition of consumer, environmental, union, and business leaders working for clean and affordable power under public control. During the WTO meeting in Seattle in December '99, Global Exchange helped galvanize world attention on the need to place labor and environmental concerns over corporate profits. San Francisco Magazine named her to their power list as one of the 60 players who rule the Bay Area. I've seen her on TV. I met her backstage for the first time. She's a moral powerhouse. Here's Medea Benjamin.
Campaign trail with Ralph again, and this time it's 2 issues. One is energy, and I'm running for the Mud Board because I really believe we got to take over from PG&E. And the other is a campaign around peace, which is perhaps the biggest one we've been asked to wage in our lifetime right now. Let me start with the peace one. I was just interviewed by somebody on television. They said, there's 100% certainty that there's going to be another terrorist attack. How do you feel, Medea? Are you afraid? And I said, of course I'm afraid. I haven't slept a good night since September 11th. Is anybody here? Of course we're afraid. I have family in New York. My family is in the very city in Florida where they found the anthrax outbreak. I'm afraid to get on a plane. I'm afraid when my friends and relatives and husband get on a plane. I'm afraid for where this cycle of violence is leading us to. I'm afraid we might be getting ourselves into World War III. I'm afraid for what is happening to the Afghan people right now, the millions of people that are fleeing from the bombs. I would be crazy if I were not afraid, but the problem with fear is that it is paralyzing, and right now we have to be organizing. So we have to find from the depths of that fear and despair, we've got to find hope. So where do we find the hope? I find the hope in many places. First of all, while our, quote, leaders like George Bush and even Mayor Giuliani, and even here in San Francisco, they're saying, get back to normal life, go out and shop. Did you hear that? Giuliani even said, go out to the Gap. And Willie Brown here has desecrated the flag and put it on a shopping bag and said, open for business. But guess what? People are more interested in other pursuits right now. They're more interested in family, friends, rebuilding community, and that's very good for the spiritual life of this nation. I find hope that out of this horrendous wave of hate crimes that has led to deaths and stabbing and targeting of Arab American and Muslims and those perceived to be Arab American and Muslims has come something else. We at Global Exchange have started this campaign. Our community is a hate-free zone. We can't keep enough of these in stock. They are pouring and pouring out of our office, and there have been over 8,000 of them downloaded over the web, not just in the United States. They're downloading them in Europe, in Australia, everywhere. We have also seen that when merchants are targeted, other small businesses come out to support them. We've had outpouring of people who want to be trained in the accompaniment program to go physically with people who have been threatened. So out of these hate crimes has come an outpouring of love, and that is by far the most powerful weapon we have against terrorism. Where else do I find hope? Before September 11th, I'm afraid that the majority of people in this country were in an ignorant state of bliss about the world, didn't care much about it, didn't think it was important. The world stopped at our borders, and suddenly people have to face the reality. We are one of a community of nations, and it's time we start acting like one of a community of nations. People in this country have started to ask themselves a question I never thought I would hear in my lifetime. Why are there people around the world that hate us? And that is such a profound question. It leads to such an opening for us to talk about issues that are important to all of us here, but we haven't had the voice. And now we can start saying, if they hate us because we are supporting repression in Palestine, guess what? Let's stop supporting repression in Palestine. Because we have been killing children and innocent people in Iraq for all too long, let's stop the sanctions, stop killing innocent people. And this is time where we can talk about something very important, like an international criminal court. That is the place that the perpetrators of this crime should be tried. And we should ask, why is it the United States has refused to sign on to the International Court? And isn't it time we do it in a hurry? And isn't it time we also sign to the treaty against landmines? And isn't it time we sign to the treaty against biological and chemical weapons? And while we're at it, let's sign on to the Kyoto Accords. And while we're at it, let's pledge never to walk out on a conference as important as a conference on racism. Why is it that we only had one person in the entire Congress and Senate that stood up to George Bush and said no to bombing? That's Barbara Lee. Where were the other progressive Democrats? Where was Russell Feingold? Where was Dennis Kucinich? Where was Maxine Waters, Jesse Jackson Jr., Paul Wellstone? Where were these people? What it points up is that we need an alternative party. We need to build the Green Party. We need to get people elected. Getting people elected, that brings me to the Mud campaign, because this Mud campaign is intimately tied to what is happening in the Middle East. Because the foundation of U.S. policy is based on one little word. Anybody know that word? Right, and more so, it's based in Central Asia on another word, and that is gas, natural gas, the Achilles heel of the energy system here in California. In fact, there are companies like Unocal that have been dying to get Afghanistan, a pipeline through Afghanistan over to Pakistan so we could bring that natural gas. We have to say no to the dependence on foreign resources. We have to say no to fossil fuels. We have to say yes to energy independence and yes to clean energy, and that's what we can do November 6th. The only way we can do it is if you join us. We are having mobilizations at the Green Party office every single weekend, every Saturday, every Sunday, from now until the elections. Please join us or stop by our tables and we'll give you a precinct to walk tonight. So, finally, let me say that what gives me hope is that we had an amazing grassroots anti-corporate globalization movement that we were building. Now we have to take that movement and we have to merge it with the emerging peace and human rights movement. And we have to build a movement for economic justice, for political justice, and for human rights around that world. We have to build a movement that puts life values before money values. We have to build a movement that puts the oneness of the human family right up front and center. And in closing, I want to invite a family up here who for me represents that oneness of the human family. This is a family that I recently met and have grown to love and admire. The father, Saif Atala, and the mother, Angelica, are shop owners in Noe Valley. Their store was attacked after September 11th. They had "Go Home Arab" repeatedly painted on the storefront. They had eggs thrown at the window. They had people come in and verbally abuse them. And then one day their 5-year-old daughter, Zena, came home from school and said, "What is a terrorist and why are the people at school calling me a terrorist?" This is a family also, I should say, where the two daughters, 2 and 5 years old, speak both English, Arabic, and Spanish. They represent the best of our human family, and I'd like to come up and acknowledge them, and please give them an incredibly warm welcome. Thank you. And the oneness of the human family, I'd like to give them a bird of love, a bird of hope, a bird of peace, and it's a canary, so it's a bird of music as well.
Thank you very much. Make me feel very good. My family and I, we have been the victim of the hate crime. We have been verbal abused, and we have been treated as a suspect. Because we are Middle Eastern looking men, Middle Eastern looking family. There is no other reason. Our business has been vandalized, has been written Arab go home, has been terrorists go home, which is my home in San Francisco, which is I'm very proud of it. I have my daughter, beautiful daughter, Zena. She's 5 years old, kindergarten. She came one day home from the school, and she asked me, "What do you mean terrorist, Daddy?" And I explained to her she's only 5 years. She said, "Why kids in the school call me terrorist?" Imagine, this is the future generation of the United States. This is your future, America, has been treated with hate and discrimination. She has no fault, just because her origin and her religion. Is the time to rise together? Is the time to unite together as Americans? And is the time to raise war against the hunger, against the violation, against the violence, against the AIDS against the discrimination, not to against the human being. And it is, I hope, the peace for all of us and for all of the world. United States to be a leader with compassion and forgiving and for peace, not for bomb or discrimination. We are all American and we are proud to be American. Thank you very much, and peace for all.
They're so special that me and everything needs to be okay in the future. We need peace. We need silence. We need everything. We need to be more. Me and my family are Muslim. One day I came to school.
Yeah, I get how we need peace.
We need peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A quick introduction for an individual who wrote the MUD, what's the word? Now my name is MUD. The MUD Initiative, and who got it on the ballot, but more importantly, represented my daughter Holly in a personal injury suit. Neil Eisenberg.
Good evening. The other day, yesterday, the San Francisco Weekly said that it was going to take 10 years of litigation if the MUD passes, and that PG&E will be in court for 10 years. And I'm here to tell you that I spent 8 years protesting the war in Vietnam, and it came to an end. And I went to the University of Wisconsin Law School, where we learned the Nader School of Law. And we learned, what do you do with corporations? You sue them, and you sue them, and you sue them. And I came out to San Francisco, and I'm proud to be endorsed by the Bay Guardian and Medea Benjamin for city attorney. And for the last 3 years, I have gone to court against PG&E, and I have sued them, and I have sued them, and I have sued them. And we had that MUD ballot as a result of those lawsuits. And when I become the Bay Guardian, Medea Benjamin city attorney, I will sue them and sue them and sue them, and we will take the power back because it is ours.
Now I'm going to introduce the man who's going to introduce Ralph Nader. A lot of people wonder how Nader can be so dedicated. I voted for him, but I've watched him as a heroic figure and a moral activist for decades. There's a practice called Tantric Yoga, which is a discipline. This is primarily a male thing where through sheer willpower, a man can make the spermatozoa swim backwards, do the backstroke along the shaft of his penis, up the spinal column, into the cranial cavity, which cures baldness from the inside. Well, Ralph Nader practices the deluxe tantric yoga, where one can actually ejaculate for 2 inches and then recall it, as if it were damaged parts in an automobile. Hey, Ralph, did you come? I can't recall. So, I'm proud to introduce Nader, forgive me. I guess that's what they mean by Nader's Raiders. Okay, no more. Michael Franti is an activist and a poet. Obviously not an unknown. He started out as a bass player for the Beatniks in the late 80s. He subsequently founded the Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy. In 1994, Franti formed Spearhead, which made an immediate impact with its debut release, Home, a provocative depiction of race, poverty, AIDS, and other socio-political concerns. It sold over 200,000 copies worldwide, and that's without any of those downloading things. Spearhead's latest, Stay Human, features 13 new songs interwoven with the tale of an activist who is to be executed for a murder her community is sure she didn't commit. Between dramatic call-in reports and a highly charged phone conversation with the governor, played by Woody Harrelson, the music is full of unflinchingly bold and fundamentally positive lyrics. Stay Human's storyline also reflects Franti's passion about the issues currently facing community radio and the possibility of internet radio. But music should speak for itself. Here's Michael Franti.
How y'all doing? I said, how you doing? Super loud. Anyway, it's nice to be here. I never thought I'd be in Temple. And it's amazing. I came through the back door and there's a room down there. And they said, this is the library. There's all these little scrolls and clouds and secret things. And I was like, what if I move one? I was talking to Ice-T, the famous musician, rapper, activist, poet, soul searcher. And he said to me, you know, Michael, us rappers, we rap. Musicians, we make music. What the fuck do you activists do? Activate? And I thought, that's actually a pretty good description to try to activate, to enrage, enlighten, and inspire. And so I'm happy to be here tonight, and especially to be able to introduce Ralph, because he is enraged, enlightened, and inspired me a lot. And before I do that, I'm going to do a couple songs. First one is an acapella one. I like to do things acapella just so I can get my nerves out. And it's about how all of us in this progressive movement have decided to get on this bus together. And this bus is moving in a forward direction, you know what I'm talking about. And the politicians of the world can choose to either just get on the bus with the rest of us and pay the quarter, everybody else. Or they can follow behind the bus going, wait for me, or this bus might just chase them out the street. Can I get a soul clap on them? I walk into the home, just the best home, because I had to throw my video. People all from me last night, and all the people that put out there, some of them didn't need breakfast, because they had to rush so early. Got to put them in their pictures, because the crazy thoughts of living is never forgiving the family, for getting behind on payments on the color TV. While I'm standing and driving my mouth up and drinking water, while I got to check my checkbook if I need to see the doctor. I look out the window with some 45 foot pivot, or a smile politician, begging me for a donation, brother. Don't you see who you're talking to? You say that children ain't happy with all the tricks you do. all the promises that you make. That's how you make your living, looking people's lives take. With all the promises that you make. If you're taking us for granted, it will be the last mistake. Keep on running, but you can't run no faster than us. You keep running, but you can't run as fast as this bus. No, where the bus goes, to another neighborhood. With some shiny, happy people, all that happens to be good. You can sing up the trees on the trees. We don't broken bottles, we don't broken drinks. They just say politicians down the floor on these people. We take the speakers all out of people in next door. Saying knock them off one time, two times, but I see the best is your thing. If you want to take out the sight, so fast you will win. Reminds me we on TV. Taking education funds and giving them to police, you see. What's in a man, I know the left and the right, the up and $1 million about the money, I take the last, keep on running. But you can't run no faster than us. You can keep running, but you can't run as fast as this bus. No. Y'all sound good. Get clap. To the people. Anyway, George Bush made a speech tonight. He was talking about he was becoming the world's football coach. And he was going to lead the team on this crusade to rid the world of terrorism in this new high-tech war. And when the attack of the World Trade Center first happened, there was a lot of people who came out waving their flags, and I was really scared by it because I saw a lot of my friends who were also people of color who were picking up the flag, and some of them were blindly following what was going on, and others of them were waving the flag because they meant, I'm just like you, please don't hurt me. And I think it's really important that we understand the distinction between patriotism and nationalism. And patriotism is when we have a critical analysis of what's taking place in our country, and we make a decision on what we're going to do, like when Dr. King said he was going to speak out against the Vietnam War, and we got to make a patriotic act. Nationalism is when you just go and say the president is the president, so we're going to do whatever he says and follow that. So I think it's not just so important that you raise the flag, or if you do, what flag you raise. I think what's really important is what's behind it. What are your motives and intentions behind whatever flag you choose to wear? And I hope that we can move beyond just raise the flag of a single nation, and we raise the flag of unity for all people. I wrote this song today out at Cedar Park, where we did a peace concert Sunday. Peace and peace behind the colors that you fly. Peace and peace. She wants us to move. You say you're sorry. He's no other choice. How can we be sorry when you kill people with your voice? You chase down all your enemies, like bring them to their knees, and bond the world to pieces. military man. Smell of flesh and burning pain. So I cry out to the people that stand up and do us this thing. All of us gone crazy. I sing this one thing. You can't chase down all the enemies. I bring them to their knees and bomb the world to peace. But you can't bomb the peace. Well, you may even find solutions for hunger and disease. You can bomb the world to peace. But you can't bomb the peace. I say, how to the people that yes, I say, how to the people that I say, how to the people that let's get it on. Bring them to their knees. You can bomb the world to pieces, but you can't bomb their dreams. Well, you may even find a solution to hunger and disease. Yes, you can certainly bomb the world to pieces, but you can't bomb their dreams. Doing my poem for everyone. This is a poem about our voice as a group of people. It's about our unity and coming together and the importance of the motives and intentions behind why we unify and why we come together. And they say that when somebody speaks very passionately, they say that they're speaking from the heart. And for me, the heart is like a drum. It keeps beating, it never stops beating. The notes will speed up and when you raise up, the notes will slow down and we can cool out. And our drum is our tenacity, and that's what we need now, is perseverance. When we went to the World Trade Organization protests about the world, it changed overnight. We woke up the next morning and we saw 2 anarchists on the front page of the paper, quote unquote anarchists, breaking windows. And we said, oh, so bad. And so it's important that we have perseverance, move on, and that together we bring all our drums together, and that the harder that they come after us, the harder they hit this drum, the louder we become. I was born with talent, soul with an apple. Deep beneath the legs, I sink my roots. No need for mechanical, I come strictly organic. When I need peace, I look to the east. That's why I'm never scared of peace. Even though they try to play it, I'm protected by the one, always greater. So now I reveal to you, because you want to see the contour of my mystery, the strength of my arches, and the color of my conscience, and the way that I process my diction. Some fact, some fiction, some mystery, and some future fantasy. I'm the trunk that holds the branches, the leaves that do the dance. My flowers, romantic. My love, gigantic. From Africa, transatlantic, transatlantic. In the heat of the sun, I bring shade for everyone, like the beat on the water. I'm the skin on the drum. I keep on living with the fullness of the one, like the heat of the sun or the skin on the drum. I keep on living with the fullness of the one, like the heat of the sun or the skin on the drum. But now I'm fully marinated, and I'm ready for the fire, so you can fire one, fire two. See, I've been fully marinated, and now I'm ready for the fire, so you can fire one, fire two. See, I've been fully marinated, and now I'm ready for the fire. See, I'm beginning to perspire. From deep within to the skin, yo, the feminine and the masculine. The pieces of the puzzle, seeming reflections in the puddle. After the storm, the purple of the sky brings to mind another time when we resided below the waterline. Life was fine there, human, divine. But in the years following, evil men came, swallowing everything in sight. Some learned to run, some stayed to fight. I kneeled at the tomb of the soldier, said I would love to behold her. The magic in store there. She touched me on the shoulder. She said, in time, all is revealed. A box of light be unsealed. Now listen to me, son. Be like the skin on the drum. I keep on living with the fullness of the one like the heat of the sun or the skin on the drum. I keep on living with the fullness of the one like the heat of the sun or the skin on the drum. But now I'm fully marinated, and now I'm ready for the fire, so you can fire one, fire two. See, I've been fully marinated, and now I'm ready for the fire, so you can fire one, fire two, fire one. And as all the smoke clears, and the police and the protesters go home, and the sting of pepper spray remains on my lips, just as the morning dewdrops are the teardrops of the night, my emotions are always there for you, and will never leave you dry. Bless. Ladies and gentlemen, man, we're all waiting for. Give it up, Mr. Ralph.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. That was a wonderful presentation. Everyone who's preceded me here, I want to really thank. And of course, this couldn't have happened without a whole bunch of volunteers, and you know who you are. And I want to thank you very much for bringing this together. It's very important at a time like this to retain our focus. We just heard our president say repeatedly that Americans should go about their business, and we'll make reference to the tragedy of recent weeks. But first, I want to focus on what our business is tonight, which is a series of civic rallies all over the country. It started in Portland, and we've done one in Phoenix, and we just did one last night in Cleveland, and now San Francisco. And having one city hand off to another as we bring together progressive forces, civic groups who often don't connect with one another, and connect the local issues with national issues in a stronger democracy drive. I mean, we just have to have a stronger, deeper democracy. There's a reason why people like democracy, because it tends to solve problems and prevent injustices and meet necessities. But it's a wonderful abstraction. But the only place where democracy comes before work is in the dictionary, as we all know. So we really have to work at it. And what these rallies are about are not just one-time events. They're igniting events of much greater proliferation in the region where they are held. So we hope that you will carry on with other gatherings in Marin County and Berkeley and other places in the Bay Area. And as this momentum begins to build up, maybe we'll get a little courage on the part of our political representatives who are not showing much courage on important issues confronting the country. Just saw a stampede situation in Congress where the resolution that was passed basically stripped Congress of its constitutional role in that foreign policy situation, in that military situation. And there was only one member of the entire Congress who said that the Senate and the House have a constitutional role here. We shouldn't be giving it away in a kind of stampede panic. And that was Barbara Lee from Berkeley. You know, there were about 50 other members like John Lewis and Dennis Kucinich who really were leaning in her direction but backed off at the last moment. And you ask why? Well, the one easy thing is to say, well, he didn't have the political fortitude, but you can't say that about John Lewis. I mean, he was the most courageous fighter for civil rights back in the 60s when it really was very, very tough. What the real reason is that they didn't hear enough from back home. They just looked at the polls, and every time we have a crisis in this country in terms of any kind of foreign threat, starting with the alien sedition laws and going up to post-World War I, etc. Every time we do, it's the same pattern. There's a political panic, a stampede, a rallying around the executive, giving the executive more power, stripping it of the courts, stripping the legislative branch, and now we have this added retinue of poll after poll responding, obviously, to the general question, and not getting down into the consequences of one pathway in contrast to another. So these gatherings are designed to focus on 10 major advances that our country should have achieved in the 1950s. So never postpone until next year what should have been done in 1951. And the first stage, we call them the first stage goals for a better America. And quite a few of them have already been accomplished in Western Europe and Canada. Coming out of the rubble of World War II, these countries with their social democratic parties and their strong trade union movement, and this was before the rise of the global corporation powers, they gave their people, by law, rights that we do not have today. And, for example, they gave their people, everyone, universal health care coverage, completely. The things that we're still struggling for in this country, even people working for government are struggling for. 1 month paid vacation, full maternity leave, full family sick leave, decent public transit, decent retirement benefits, much more facilities to form trade unions than our obstructive labor laws provide, such as Taft-Hartley. And after a while, you begin wondering why the richest country in the world is bringing up the rear on these issues. So here quickly are the first stage goals for a better America, which will not be particularly new to you, but it's nice to put it into focus, and a lot of the tables and civic groups that are here tonight have been fighting for parts of them, and unfortunately, and we must all admit, not getting that far. We have been suffering from a weakening democracy in our country as more and more power is in the hands of the few. Corporations now have no longer any allegiance to country or community other than to control them as they lie astride the giant their planet. They're just out of control. And you can actually have a whole list of indicators which show that year after year, especially in the last 21 years, we've been losing ground. And when we lose ground democratically, in terms of our ability to voice, our ability to remedy, our ability to mobilize, our ability to connect, our ability to control our country as the sovereignty of the people is supposed to have us control. As you see the decline, you see the results. There's a very clear connection between a weakening democratic society and the problems that grow out of that weakening. That's why, for example, we have 47 million workers who don't make a living wage, 1 out of every 3 workers in this country. That's why we have a federal minimum wage that's $2.15 less in purchasing power adjusted for inflation than it was in 1968, when the economy was half the size in production per output per capita than it is today. That's why we have 20% poverty. Here in California, it's 25% poverty. University of San Diego, Robert Felmuth, professor of law, will give you that data. If you add the second category, which is near poverty, there are 2 categories the Department of Labor has, poverty and near poverty. 45% of the children in California are in those 2 categories. By the way, in the Netherlands, the child poverty rate is at 3%, and they're ashamed of it and want to do something about it, just by contrast. So the top bosses of the richest 300 corporations are now making 450 times more than the entry-level wage in their operation. 450. In 1940, the bosses paid themselves 12 times the entry-level wage in the richest, largest 300 corporations. The top 1% of the wealthiest people in this country have financial wealth equivalent to the bottom 95% of all Americans combined. And of course, our public infrastructure is crumbling in so many ways. So we really have problems, and no one's going to solve it except the people who are organized and informed, and bringing more people together in this way. We have far more problems than we deserve and far more solutions than we're applying. The solutions are all over the place. Energy solutions are here, there, around the country, but they're not diffused in any quantitative sense. We've got solutions in terms of what to do with the public school system. We've got solutions on what to do with renewable energy and dramatic new public transit, etc. But we're not putting them to work because our democracy is getting weaker and weaker, and the few are making the decisions for the many. And when that happens, they don't really care about the many as much as they care about themselves. No. So here are the 10, and each one is a sentence or 2, and just ask yourself, aren't we up to this? And if we're not up to this, we just don't have any civic self-respect. We're just better at diagnosis than at movement and resolution. And sometimes when the better you are at diagnosis, the less attention you pay to movement. You're so incredibly analytic and you know exactly why things aren't being done, so you don't do them. So, one, enact legislation that mandates publicly financed public elections and broad reforms the electoral process. And that includes facilities to make it easier for workers, taxpayers, consumers, and voters to band together and organize. The only way you deal with organized money is with organized people. And we've got to make it real easy for people through the media and through facilities to band together, as is being done here on the public power issue, about which we'll say a few words. MUD and Proposition I, among other propositions that are up. And if you cannot win those propositions in the city of San Francisco, given what you've been going through, vis-a-vis PG&E, ripping you off and giving their executives bonuses and going into a bankruptcy and siphoning billions of dollars into their parent company, which then has other subsidiaries investing your money in Indonesian electric plants in South America and East Coast plants, if you cannot beat them in this compact community that we're all told on the East Coast is one of the most progressive, dynamic communities in all of North America, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. And that means getting out the vote. That means going to your neighbors and your friends and over the water cooler with the co-workers and get out the vote. 85,000 votes will win all of these propositions and set this city on a renewable energy, efficient energy, on a reasonable price where you, through the MUD utility district, will control the distribution of electricity. And you know that will make you the 2201 municipality that owns its own electric system in this country. So you're not exactly pioneering. You have Sacramento that's shown you since the 1940s how to do it. They even shut down a nuclear plant, and they're leading in conservation. That's called SMUD. You know, you have athletic pride in your sports teams, and it's time for some civic pride. It's at least as important, would you say? So let's hit a civic home run next month on Election Day. The second, enact living wage laws, strengthen worker health and safety laws, and repeal Taft-Hartley and other obstructions to collective bargaining and worker rights. The third, issue environmental protection standards, systematically reduce damaging environmental toxics, which is a major source of silent violence in our country, and to promote sustainable technologies. Number 4, I just mentioned it, provide full Medicare coverage for everyone in this country and revamp our national programs for prevention of disease and trauma. Prevention. Five, launch a national mission to abolish poverty as other Western democracies have done, based on proposals made long ago in this country by conservatives, liberals, and progressives, including Milton Friedman and Richard Nixon, for heaven's sake. Six, design and implement a national security policy to counter violence and the silent mass violence of global diseases, TB, AIDS, malaria, and so on, environmental devastation, and extreme poverty. Reduce the waste and corporate domination of defense budgets. A wasteful defense is a weak defense. We need to learn how to wage peace, and we don't give any resources to the waging of peace compared to the waging of war. That's not smart. Renegotiate NAFTA and GATT to be democratic and to be pull-up, not pull-down standards that subordinate labor, consumer, and environmental requirements to the supremacy of international commerce. 8, end the criminal injustice system which discriminates viciously against the poor and people of color, and reject the failed war on drugs, and replace corporate prisons with superior alternatives. 9, defend and strengthen the civil justice system where wrongfully injured people can have their full day in court against their perpetrators, like corporations who expose them to toxics and dangerous products. Apply the criminal laws against corporate crime. We need a crackdown on crime in the suites. and fully prosecute consumer fraud and abuses. Expand consumer, worker, and children's health, safety, and economic rights. We know how to do it. The proposals have been thought out. We need the civic propulsion behind it to get it done. When you see how many children in this country are exposed to cancer, respiratory, and other toxic producing materials. In Hartford, Connecticut, inner city, 40% of the children suffering from asthma, and the place has quite a few incinerators not that far away. That is a serious form of violence, and maybe a corporate form of violence that doesn't make the inability of these children even to breathe in the land of the free, home of the brave. They don't even have the ability to breathe. And it's time to really raise that to a high level, a priority. Children and infants are much more vulnerable to toxics than adults. And 10, strengthen investor shareholder rights, remedies, and authority over managers and officers and board of directors of corporations. That means giving labor pension funds, who hold a lot of these shares, the power of ownership. The people who own the corporations don't control them. They're controlled by the executives, the CEOs, and the rubber stamp board of directors. And end the massive corporate welfare schemes that distort and misallocate public budgets, where tax money goes to stadiums and ballparks, while schools, clinics, and public transit systems crumble for lack of repair. This also involves reintroducing the historic function of using the corporate charter, which all state governments give to corporations, as an instrument of ensuring corporate accountability and the sovereignty of the people over the sovereignty of corporations. Remember, corporations are chartered by us through our state government. They don't exist unless they're chartered. That means we can condition the charter, suspend the charter, put the corporation on probation, subject it to a 3 strikes and you're out provision, and otherwise bring it under the rule of law. Corporations were meant to be our servants as they were devised in the early 19th century. They were not meant to be our masters. Now, the propositions that are up in November are being attacked by PG&E using your money. Isn't that a wonderful thing? They're a legal monopoly. They use your money, part of the checks you send them every month, plaster the TV, and engage in the usual propaganda and distortion and falsification. They have little signs on posters saying, you know, I saw the other today, no on prop I, it's costly. Can you imagine PG&E saying anything about being costly? 33% rate increases here, 45% rate increases there, sucking the money out under the deregulation. Here's what PG&E has done in just 5 years. First, it misled the state legislature by ramming through that legislative deregulation monstrosity on the basis that they were going to reduce your rates big time starting year 2000. Aren't you saving all that money? Now, so they misled, then they mismanaged their own business, top-heavy with swollen executive compensation packages to the top people of PG&E, and they mismanaged them into bankruptcy. So now they're mischaracterizing Proposition I and the other propositions in order to try to win in November at the polls. So, you know, be very, very aware of what's going on here, because when we fought for Proposition 9 in 1998 here in California, statewide referendum, and that was designed to taper off some of the real rough edges of electric deregulation. The utilities spent $45 million on TV, and they beat us overwhelmingly. And they got all kinds of front groups with nice-sounding names, and they gave all kinds of grants from their foundations to various groups that either compromised them or got them to sign on. So they would come on TV and say, gee, look at it. The Republican Party's against Prop 9, Democratic Party's against Prop 9, Labor's against Prop 9, consumer groups are against Prop 9, minority groups are against Prop 9. It must be a bad thing. Of course, they didn't say PG&E and Edison are funding all this, and that they're the ones who are really against Prop 9. And of course, San Diego got struck first with these huge rate increases over a year and a half ago. And for low-income people, you know, going from $15 or $20 to $60 or going from $30 to $100 a month, that means something. That means they're going to go without. So on the election day in November, really get this through, and it's going to be done by word of mouth. Your word of mouth can overwhelm their millions on TV. Your word of mouth can overwhelm those millions on TV. Now let's talk about the massacre of September 11th and the aftermath here. How many of you, just be very candid with yourself, how many of you since September 11th have wanted to express an opinion that was something other than the stampede thought police process? How many of you have wanted to express an opinion to a friend or publicly and just swallowed it? How many? Huh? But see, this is a sign of what happens after every crisis. Is truth is the first casualty. Candor is the first casualty. And before we even discuss this, we've got to lay down some ground rules that this country is based on a vigorous use of civil liberties and constitutional freedoms and freedom of speech. Because this country is based on the premise that when governments don't get enough inputs from people around their country, the people who are going to have to pay the price, some of them, government is going to make bad mistakes. That's what a dictator does. Dictator closes off all inputs. Dictator thinks he knows everything of how to proceed, and that's why they make serious mistakes. Thank goodness they make those mistakes. It's about the only thing that does them in. Their own hubris, their own arrogance, their own secrecy, their own domineering input. Now what we have to do is to lay the groundwork, and we can use the words of our leaders in the last few weeks, and I'll share them with you. Okay? George W. Bush says to Congress, in his statement to Congress, referring to the terrorists, quote, "They hate our freedoms, our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote, our freedom to assemble, and our freedom to disagree with each other," end quote. Okay, now we're free to disagree. Huh? All right. He also said today Americans should go about their business. Well, that's what we're doing, President Bush. We're going about our business. I wonder how he applies one of his most frequent statements last year. If I could only read his mind. His most frequent statement on the campaign trail last year was, quote, "I trust the people, not the government." End quote. Well, Abraham Lincoln had something to say about that. He said, quote, "I am a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts." End quote. Now, like most of you, when you heard the news and 6,000 people's lives were extinguished in less than an hour, like most people, the grief and the mourning gives way to how can we honor their memory? I remember one story that was told that happened on the 70th floor of the World Trade Center. There was a quadriplegic who went there every day to work. And as the sirens and the fumes and the smokes and the pandemonium and people rushing by him to get out of that building, he couldn't get out of that building. And a 55-year-old man was his co-worker and his close friend, and called his family on the cell phone. And he said, "I can't leave him." And he went down with him. He didn't leave us. How do we honor the memory of people with that kind of valor and with that kind of loyalty to one another? And I suggest we do it in a very, very deliberate, systematic, and thoughtful way. And we've got to do it in a variety of ways. We are not a one-track country. We have to do it in a variety of ways because what is opening up out of this disaster is one of the most complicated and perilous military and foreign policy moves that our country has engaged in quite a long time. And we've got to be involved in how it's going to be shaped or redirected or replaced with better policies. First, of course, this is an international crime. It's not the only international crime. It is an international crime of major proportions, and we've got to find ways by which these criminals who backed the attackers are brought to justice. That's one way we have to honor the memory of these people. Second, they would be entitled to know why $30 billion a year in our intelligence agencies could not uncover a 4-year plan by these attackers who left tracks all over the East Coast month after month. And these are the same intelligence agencies who understand that they failed because, one, they don't communicate with each other, and there are all kinds of jealousies, and they're falling all over each other, and there are tens of thousands of each other, and now they're asking for more money. They're asking for more money. Well, it isn't more money that's going to get better intelligence, it's less money. As the head of the CIA said the other day, they're drowning in technology and they need more human intelligence. I thought that was the only intelligence there was. Third, we have to make sure that we don't give up our civil liberties and civil rights and constitutional freedom, because not just because that's what they want us to do, which is the usual explanation. We've got a more fundamental reason, because that's what we're all about. That's how we foresee and forestall. That's how we try to contribute to a safer and peaceful world, by using these constitutional freedoms. And we have to also be careful that future attacks are not made on our country by making mistakes abroad and worsening the situation. We have to make sure, in other words, that our president and his cabinet do not endanger the United States of America and slaughter hundreds of thousands of innocent people abroad by not being held in check and not having the full input of the best ideas, suggestions, and historical knowledge brought forth by the American people. And we have to make sure that important domestic problems, projects, and missions, which are life and death missions, as universal health care is, and environment and health and safety and child protection, that those are not shunted aside, as they seem to be now, by this focus on this tragedy. Now let me just run through what I mean by all this, because it's very important to get down to a little detail. Let's take, for example, the issue of civil liberties. There is no one in Washington who will say, we are going to restrict our civil liberties in order to enhance our national security. They will say we have to engage in some inconvenience in order to enhance our national security. The former head of the CIA in charge of Middle East operations was on 60 Minutes about 2 weeks ago, and Mike Wallace asked him this explicit question. He said, this was to Frank Anderson. He said, Mr. Anderson, how much of our civil liberties are we going to have to give up? And here's his response, quote, absolutely none. If we cannot handle this problem without surrendering our civil liberties or constitutional freedoms, I do not want to live in this country, and I do not want to offer my son up to it. End quote. That is Frank Anderson talking. Frank Anderson. And when the former head of the Middle East operations for the CIA says something like that, he deserves to be quoted, doesn't he? All right. So what does John Ashcroft do? The same John Ashcroft that could have been defeated in terms of his nomination if we had a little backbone in the U.S. Senate. He sent over a proposal under the cloak of fighting terrorism that united the right wing and the liberals in the House of Representatives. I mean, when you get Barney Frank and Bob Barr on the same side saying, we don't want this kind of big brother, we don't want this kind of invasion of the rights of innocent people under the pretext of having this as a necessary brace of tools to deal with the terrorists, then you can see how bad it really was. And it was infringing on the confidentiality of the grand jury proceedings, massive surveillance that could apply in later years to millions of innocent people that have nothing to do with this situation. It involved the detention of people with a very cleverly drafted phrase that could keep them indefinitely without presenting charges against them. I mean, do you know how inimical that is to our democratic traditions and sense of justice? Not to mention other parts of this. Well, without much ballyhoo, they've shaved off some of these provisions. And in the House of Representatives, they put a 2-year limitation on the legislation. So they would say, we'll look at it completely new 2 years from now. The Senate version does not have a 2-year or any cutoff so far, and that is now being deliberated. But the bottom line of these proposals is to strip our rights of judicial review and the rights of immigrants to judicial review, and also to vastly strengthen the forces of the executive branch. And that really sort of upsets the whole checks and balances concept of our founding fathers. But as the president of the University of Michigan said the other day, this is what happens after a crisis in our history. They move to restrict our constitutional freedoms, and it's our role to make sure the way we contact our senators and representatives in all the modes of communication that we have, personal, letter, phone, email, whatever, to make them realize that while we don't have the details, and they're not exactly a bunch of town meetings all over the country deliberating this potential surrender of our civil liberties, that we expect them to stand tall and not be stampeded, and to make sure that the necessary enforcement tools, if they don't have the necessary enforcement tools, they seem to have plenty for years, do not compromise the rights of people as they go about their daily work and develop a huge big brother in terms of all kinds of surveillance and invasion of proper judicial review recourse by the American people. So that's one area that we really have to deal with, and one area that we can in the next few days and weeks have an important impact over. Now, let me discuss the issue of power and vulnerability. We are the most powerful economic and military force in the world. But what we don't give sufficient credence to is that we are also probably the most vulnerable country in the world because of our technology, interdependence, and complexity. The attacks on those buildings on September 11th shut down our country for a week and are now producing panic and fear and economic dislocation and forthcoming government deficits and a huge shift of money into the military budget. And everybody is clawing with any power in Washington to take away the kind of resources that were supposed to be distributed to the people of this country in various categories of need. And so this is a sign that we are extremely vulnerable. And the other side, the attackers, don't have that much power, but they are very less vulnerable. They're willing to sacrifice their lives, as they did. So they have little power, but they have far less vulnerability. We have a lot more to lose. And if we don't realize that, we will not be as cautious and smart and deliberate and strategic and long-range thinking and willing to try alternatives that don't have massive and complicated boomerangs in future years as our past blunders overseas have. That's why we got to focus, not just on our power, but on our vulnerability. Now, Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense, said the other day something that wasn't widely reprinted. He said, quote, "Poverty, disease, illiteracy can be breeding grounds for tolerance of terrorism." End of quote. Well, gee, it's very important to have that recognized by the Secretary of Defense. He was at Princeton with me. He's a year ahead of me, and sometimes I can read him when he's on TV. He has that pained look in his visage, quite different from his deputy, Mr. Wolfowitz. You know what I found in Washington in the last month or so? That both in the press and in our government, there is a heavy preponderance of war hawks who've never worn a uniform compared to those who have worn a uniform, who are trying to be a little bit more cautious. Maybe Rush Limbaugh and Bill O'Reilly and Britt Hume and Dick Cheney and Wolfowitz and others ought to go over there. Now, this raises the issue of foreign policy, and here's where the thought police comes in Washington. Whenever you try to say, well, you know, this is rather intricate. These attackers are not just out for economic gain. They're not like corporations, marauding. They got something in their mind that leads them to this. And don't you think we should know our adversary? And back comes the thought police. That's justifying what they did. No, that's not justifying what they did. What they did was criminal, and butchery. It was a massacre more than it was attack. But if we don't understand what motivated them to this prolonged planning and this suicide mission, we are not going to understand whether there is anything we can do that will have a lot of beneficial collateral benefits as well as preventing future attacks. Now, in their writings, a young scholar went through their writings and final statements, etc., and here's what they said. They are very upset at our military presence in Saudi Arabia and our support of secular dictatorships in the Islamic world. I mention secular because not all Muslims are viewed as fanatics over there. They want to practice their religion, they want to wear their clothing the way their traditions provide, and these secular dictatorships have been upending a lot of peaceful Islamic gatherings and a lot of peaceful Islamic customs. And they resent that, and they ask themselves, well, who is supporting these secular dictatorships? And the answer, more often than not, is the United States, militarily and in terms of tax dollars. So that's one thing that's in their mind. We'll get to that in a moment. The second is that the economic sanctions, not the military sanctions on the Iraqi people, are killing a lot of children and innocent men and women. That has been documented repeatedly by the American Physicians Task Force that has gone over there and the United Nations. How is that occurring? It is occurring in violation of major international conventions and treaties. You do not attack a dictator by destroying the lives of innocent people, civilians, in that country. Indeed, and the estimate by the Physicians Task Force is 5,000 Iraqi children a month are dying. They're dying from two major sources. One is, the dictator doesn't care about that. It's not enough for Madeleine Albright to say, it's Saddam Hussein, it's his fault. It's his fault. We know what he's up to. He doesn't care about it. The question is, what are we doing? What is Britain doing? What are other nations doing with this kind of boycott? And one of the first things we did is we destroyed their public infrastructure in the bombs in 1991 that destroyed their electricity system and their drinking water purification system. And those documents have now been printed in the current issue of the Progressive magazine and a cover story out of Madison, Wisconsin. And that led, of course, to contaminated water, and the little children are much more vulnerable, and they're dying from dysentery, from grievous diarrhea, from cholera, from typhoid, etc. Now, to destroy the public infrastructure and the drinking water purification systems, and then boycott the export of chlorine, the export of all kinds of equipment to repair it, is not going to destabilize Saddam Hussein. He's going to get his drinking water. He's going to get his health care. He's going to be able to point to the foreign devils who are taking the lives of little children in Baghdad as a way to further entrench his power. You do not destabilize a dictator by destroying the lives of little children and innocent adults in his regime. And this is Clinton Gore's responsibility, and Madeleine Albright, in that celebrated interview that Leslie Stahl had in 1996 when she went over to Baghdad and saw the dying children and came back and did something for 60 minutes. And she interviews Madeleine Albright, and she says, look, Madam Secretary, here's what we found, XYZ, ABC. What do you think? Is it worth the price? And she said, taken as a whole, it's worth the price. I mean, who's paying the price? All right. The third, of course, is that these people see that our country is supporting the Israeli occupation of what's left of Palestinian territory. And that support is coming in the form of military, financial support. And Israel now is as secure as it's ever likely to be, according to the Jaffa Institute of Strategic Studies in that country. They are a military powerhouse vis-a-vis their surrounding countries. They're a technological and educational and economic powerhouse. And their need for security has been established, and they're backed by the United States. The question is whether we can balance Palestinian justice in order to develop a peaceful settlement in that region. And in the negotiations at Taba last year, they came very, very close, but there are forces on both sides who don't want it. And we can see the results. And that is a constant television program on Al Jazeera television that millions of people in the Islamic and Arab world see again and again and again. And it's very important to ask ourselves, if that is what is in their minds, and if Donald Rumsfeld's right, that poverty and disease and illiteracy and repression are breeding grounds to tolerate this kind of violent behavior that we saw on September 11th, then are we candid enough to look ourselves in the eye and ask whether these foreign policies are representing the best instincts of the American people, in whose name that they are being perpetrated? And I suggest that we have to have a prolonged and detailed debate on foreign policy now and in the coming months. So we reorient our foreign policy in the post-Soviet era, when we no longer can use repressive policies in order to ward off the communist powers. That's over with now. It's been 10 years. What's the pretext now? And what we have to ask is, when are we going to turn our great beneficent society's assistance and humanity to support democratic forces in these countries and side with the millions and millions of workers and peasants for a change instead of dictators and oligarchs? It's amazing who we ally with and who we don't ally with in our world. And you know, a little bit of history will give us a little sobriety in these moments of impetuousness. A little sobriety. Some of you may remember when France controlled Algeria as a colony, and Algeria erupted in the revolution in the 1960s, and there was huge bloodshed in Algeria, and the Algerian revolutionaries took it to France proper. And there was bombs and terror in Paris and elsewhere. And the generals in Algeria representing President de Gaulle's regime were saying to de Gaulle, we want more military power. We want to wipe out this insurrection, this revolution. We want to bomb them into the Stone Age. And if you don't give us what we need, we're going to overthrow you. We're going to fly right into Paris and overthrow you. And General de Gaulle, who was not one to be intimidated, decided that the best way to cool this situation down was to give Algerians their freedom. And that was the end of the riots, and that was the end of the bombings, etc. When we caught the Nazi mass murderers right at World War II, and you want to talk about mass murderers, these fellows set new records. And when we caught Göring and Goebbels and Ribbentrop and all those, they could have been immediately disposed of by our soldiers. Immediately. On the spot. When Germany had already killed 160,000 American troops. And we didn't do that. We set up the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal, because we wanted to set their vicious record on the record for the whole world to behold. We gave them defense counsel. We had due process. And we wanted to reassert a new expansion of international law to deal with war criminals. And they were convicted, and most of them were executed. Now just think of the restraint that took at that time. And we held the rule of law. And we've got to move forward in apprehending these people under the variety of rules of law and international conventions that we are sworn to uphold. And use what the Bush administration has been referring to as diplomatic and economic and political methods, having told us that the military solution is not going to be the one that's going to win. Well, and remember when General Douglas MacArthur occupied Japan after the defeat of the Japanese Empire, and he had to think of how he was going to occupy Japan. You know, Japan, the Japanese Empire killed millions of people. In Korea, Philippines, China. They destroyed whole societies. They killed a lot of our soldiers, too. He could have gone in there with the U.S. Army, Air Force, and Navy and put a very, very tough regime on those people. Instead, he consulted with various people in our country who knew a lot about Japanese culture, including Ruth Benedict, the anthropologist, who wrote a book called The Chrysanthemum and the Sword on Japanese culture. And she said to him, General, whatever you do in your occupation, do not humiliate them. And he took that advice, and he didn't humiliate them. He actually advanced the levels of democracy. He kept the emperor as a figurehead, and he brought the economy around before we left. Think of the self-restraint that was involved there. And didn't it come out better than a brutal occupation would have come out? Because he didn't humiliate them. And yet, after World War I, when we defeated the Kaiser, the Allies, we humiliated the Germans with the Treaty of Versailles that crushed any attempt to recover economically and humiliated them in a whole variety of ways, as historians have documented. And that was the breeding ground for that Austrian Adolf Hitler to rise to power in the 1930s. When are we going to learn from history? When are we going to stop thinking that we can just bomb our way to justice? Well, we're not going to be able to bomb our way to justice. Because here's what's going to happen if we continue on the path of the last 6 days. Let's talk about the people of Afghanistan. 99% of which had nothing to do with this, are trying to feed their families, get enough work so they can just get through the day. And you know, they've been destroyed by the Soviets, and before that the British, and their own tribal warfare. Well, in 4 weeks the winter will be in Afghanistan. According to the United Nations, there are 7.5 million Afghanis who are on the verge of starvation with their families. They don't know where the next meal is coming from. And what are we doing? In order to apprehend the attackers, we are bombing that country all over. We're saying we're just hitting military targets. How many times have you heard that before? Remember in the Iraqi bombing? We just hit military targets. Oh yeah, we just bombed a bomb shelter that had 2,000 huddling Iraqis, men, women, and children, with these bombs that go deep underground, and blew them apart, completely incinerated them. And we knew that it was a bomb shelter. And that has never been satisfactorily explained, although the press has done very good reporting on it. So this business of pinpoint bombing, forget it. When you bomb every airport and destroy every airport in Afghanistan, how are you going to fly relief rations in case of famine? How are you going to ship medicines in case of dire epidemics? There's no such thing as just military target bombing. And when you bomb... And when you bomb out the electricity in Kabul, as we just did, that means that there's no electricity for the drinking water purification systems. And here we go again. And the little children are going to be the chief sufferers, along with their mamas and daddies, with typhoid and cholera and dysentery and these horrible gastrointestinal diseases. But we knocked out their electricity system. We knocked out their electricity system. We have declared war on Afghanistan without asking the Senate to declare war, as the framers of our Constitution provided for, as a safeguard. The UN has now stopped convoys of food to Afghanistan. They've already had 4 of their aid people at least killed by the bombings. So there's no food in terms of food aid to these impoverished people by international institutions. And what are we substituting? Well, we've got a new version of the first war of the 21st century. It's called Bombs Away with Rations and Snacks. There's 7.5 million people who need food, and we've dropped 135,000 snacks. Probably not 10% of which will ever reach these people to begin with. How cheap is this propaganda? How cheap is this propaganda? It's going to get more rancid and more grim. Look at this description from an article in a British paper. It says, see if I can find it here. In the meantime, here it is. This show of generosity, meaning the rations, is of course designed to impress us as well as them. The yellow packages, and I'm quoting, drifting onto the minefields of the Hindu Kush are likely to be the most over the next few days that we will see of the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. The hungry will die quietly on the forgotten trails through the mountains, huddled behind rocks, searching the streets of deserted cities, clawing for roots in the empty fields. The satellites that can count the shells stacked behind a howitzer cannot peer into the faces of the starving, end quote. This is exactly the kind of devastation those attackers want us to inflict in order to spread more hatred and more resentment and more rebellion against our country and our allies. And for those of you who want a local explanation of the roots of terrorism, I refer you to the editorial in the September 30th edition of the San Francisco Chronicle. The editorial, which had a very good analysis of asking the important questions, which today are considered the impertinent questions. And the Chronicle says, To ask such questions is not unpatriotic, nor do historical explanations absolve those who have committed these heinous crimes. Whether or not history can help us heal and can offer us the perspective and wisdom we need to fight this unprecedented threat. And then it goes through explaining why the Islamic world is upset with us. And that was your own paper, in what some have called an uncharacteristic demonstration of analytic candor. Now, in the midst of this situation come the big corporations in Washington. These are corporations who are turning this tragedy into greed and then into a pretext, demanding from Congress and the executive branch subsidies, bailouts, immunities from liability, demanding deregulation. They're going big for it, folks. They're taking advantage of this crisis in order to increase their power over the rights of the people. They're moving to put a little amendment that will open up the Arctic refuge after 26 years of not improving by law the fuel efficiency requirements for the motor vehicle industry. They are now moving for a capital gains cut. They are moving to bail out one industry after another. The airlines got theirs after announcing 85,000 workers layoff. They got $15 billion, $10 billion in loan guarantees and $5 billion in cash, just like that, stampeding a Congress and sending a bill to a willing George W. Bush with nothing in it for 85,000 workers who are laid off. This is what's going on. Now the hotel industry, the car rental industry is up there, going for the big grab. The oil industry, the securities industry, going for the big grab. Suddenly Uncle Sam is a desirable man. Suddenly they all want government to be the ultimate guarantor, the ultimate insurer, the ultimate bailer-outer of this kind of corporate capitalism. And isn't that unpatriotic? You know, we never say corporations are unpatriotic, do we, huh? We never say that. Well, they are exploiting this tragedy to a level where they were denounced a few days ago by a brilliant article in the Washington Post itself, in the business page, which had a headline something like, "Stop blaming everything on bin Laden." They're blaming all their woes going back several years, saying it was the attackers, that we got to have a bailout, we got to have a subsidy, you got to get us exemption from this law, you got to deregulate us here. And of course, they're getting away with it because our Congress is being stampeded. It's in a panic, and we've got to strengthen it and give it the kind of backbone that comes only from people back home. So you really have to, in whatever area you want to work in this subject matter, contact your members of Congress in many ways. And when they come back here during the recess, give them an earful. Give them an earful. Tell them that you expect them to have modest profiles of courage, very modest profiles of courage. They don't even give you their voting record on their website. There are only 2 members of Congress, both Republicans, who put their voting record on their website. And Frank Wolf and Christopher Shays. So while you're talking to them, tell them, you want to connect every cradle with the internet, why don't you connect your voting record with your website? Let me end on this note, and I think we've had a lot of good talk this evening, long overdue. But just give it yourself your own test. If in the coming weeks you inhibit what you really want to say about these situations, you're inhibiting the quality of democracy in our society. And once you consider your own level of inhibition to be unacceptable in terms of your own self-respect, you'll find it to be contagious. The reason why democracies always defeat dictatorships is because they're more open to review, to criticism, to proposals, to new ideas and to challenges of the conventional wisdom. That's why they always are stronger. And we should never allow anyone in Washington and in positions of political power to say to us in times of crisis, shut up, America, get in line, and just wave the flag. Because you should never let anybody take that flag away from you. That flag was not designed to be a bandana or a fig leaf. It was designed to stand for the last few words of our Pledge of Allegiance, which are, quote, with liberty and justice for all, end quote. And never you let anyone else forget that when they take your flag away from you and turn it into an instrument of silence of your voice and your First Amendment rights. When you hear discussions of moving through violent warfare to achieve a rather focused end as defined by our president, you're entitled to ask, what price violence? How many hundreds of thousands of Afghanis are going to die or starve to death or be sick to death because they don't have medicines as a result of this destruction? What's the likelihood of more attacks in our country? What is the likelihood of subordinating our domestic programs of Social Security, Medicare, health insurance, children's care, environment, education, which are now on the shelf? How much of that price are we going to pay? How much of the price are we going to pay of shoveling tens of billions of dollars into a military budget and intelligence budget that needs to be more lean and more effective rather than more overflowing with dollars? And how much price are we going to pay for spilling over into more deficit funding in the coming years? What is the price we're willing to pay here? As this effort unfolds with its enormous complexity and repercussions through one country and one continent around the world, what is the price we're willing to pay? This is a question that we must ask our leaders. What is the price that you are willing to pay? They don't want to talk about that. When you wage peace and you move with muscular international law enforcement and criminal law enforcement, and you utilize your own allies and you utilize the United Nations, and you move forward on all those grounds, you know that those prices that brutality and violence and bombing will exact will not be exacted in this manner. We don't know which pathway is going to come out the best, except from our historical perspective. And our historical perspective tells us that this kind of mindless destruction of a nation, of its infrastructure, of its drinking water systems, of its Food Relief Act, is not going to end well for them. And I fear it's not going to end well for us either. And we've got to begin probing this as we see the death toll mount in Afghanistan. I'd like to end on this note. You've got window signs for the propositions. We do want to focus on that. There are volunteers who are needed. You can, on your way out, there are tables who will give you window signs, volunteers. There are 4 weeks left. They need your contributions in order to pay printing bills and telephone bills. And it's very important to focus on all those 4 propositions. But if I had to pick one, if you don't have much time to talk with your neighbors on this, I would pick the proposition I, because that's the one that sets up the enabling municipal utility district that will deal with solar energy, renewable energy, and it will set a model for the rest of the country. Thank you very much for coming.
You've been great. Thank you very much. Let's hear it for everybody here. Remember, get a window sign on your way out. Put them in your windows. Let's win this campaign. Volunteer. Mobilization's 4 weekends left. And drop some money. Thank you.